Loki Laufeyson, the Norse god of mischief, has always been a major character in the Megami Tensei series. From its very first installment, he was there. The first summoned demon, the first villain, and you can still find him throughout the franchise to this day. Unlike the last few demons I've discussed in the series, I fully expect most of my audience to be at least somewhat familiar with Loki due to his popularity in recent years as a villain in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But that version of the character still has a lot of differences from his mythological and Megami Tensei counterparts. This video will contain spoilers for a number of games and books in the Megami Tensei series, the most notable of which being Persona 5. I included timestamps in the description in case you want to skip a couple of the games or books mentioned. And also the Poetic Edda, if anyone cares about spoilers for that. Also, before we move on any further, if you like what you see, then I highly suggest that you subscribe to the channel. I have similar videos before this on Orpheus and St. Nile, and I also have a lore video on the first book that created the Megami Tensei series. So if that catches your interest, then I hope to see you around. Alright, back to the video. According to Norse myth, Loki, also known as Lopt, yes, like that, Fire Emblem fans, is not one of the Aesir, the gods of Asgard, but was instead born to the Jotnar Farboti and Laufey. While it was traditional in Norse cultures for a person's surname to be based on their father, such as in the case of Thor Odinson, Loki instead was known as Loki Laufeyson, named for his mother. This trend of bucking tradition would go on to define a lot of Loki's life. Despite the constant warring between the Jotnar and the Aesir, Loki joined the ranks of the gods of Asgard by becoming blood brothers with Odin, the Allfather and King of the gods. This is likely because, much like Loki, Odin is a trickster who admires intelligence and wit, qualities Loki has in spades. There are some historians who theorize that Lothar, a god said to have helped Odin create the first humans, is another name for Loki, but that's not widely accepted, so don't take it at face value. Loki would serve the gods for many years as one of their own. Many times his schemes managed to save the Aesir from misfortune, though many times they caused problems as well, and they made Loki make up for his mistakes. But eventually, enough was enough. In the Poetic Edda, Loki is most prominently featured in the poem called the Lokasena, or Loki's Wrangling. It tells of Loki killing a servant of Aegir, the god of the sea, in a fit of jealousy and being removed from his mead hall. When Loki returned, using his blood bond with Odin to demand a return to the table, he began to roast the gods one by one, calling Brahi a coward, slut-shaming his wife Athun, and then proceeded to strike controversy with every other god who tried to speak against him, including Odin himself. This continued until Thor arrived and threatened Loki with physical violence, as Thor does. And Loki, of course, knows that you don't screw around with Thor, and he left. But once he left, the other gods chased him down, and bound him with the entrails of his own son, torturing him by dripping an acidic poison onto his face. His wife would come and protect him from the poison when she could, but when the shell she caught the poison in overfilled and the acid burned his face, Loki would writhe in pain so much that it would cause earthquakes. The Prose Edda would change the reasoning for this imprisonment to instead be as punishment for Loki causing the death of Odin's son Balder, an event that prophesied the beginning of Ragnarok. During Ragnarok, Loki and his children would be freed from their bondage, and would descend onto Asgard. During the prophesied fate of the gods, Loki would fight Heimdall, the guardian of the Rainbow Bridge Bifrost, and the two would wind up killing each other. There are many other stories that discuss Loki and his relationships with the Aesir, but I wouldn't have the time to discuss them all. Suffice to say, Loki is a trickster through and through, and in the Megami Tensei franchise, he is no different. His very first introduction to the series was in the novel Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei by Aya Nishitani, the birth of the entire franchise. Like I said earlier, in case you haven't read it, I do have a video about the book linked in the iCards. But to keep it short, Loki was the first demon summoned by the high school student Akemi Nakajima. Loki, as expected, manipulated the boy, playing on his desire for power and recognition to build a cult in Loki's name. By the time Nakajima realized he'd lost control of the situation, it was already too late, and Loki had gathered enough power to manifest in the physical world. Loki would also appear as a secondary antagonist in the original Megami Tensei game, which itself was a sequel to the novels. In it, he served as one of Lucifer's elite minions, set with the task of securing the Valhalla corridor and preventing Nakajima and his girlfriend, Yumiko Shirisagi, from retrieving the Orb of Malice, which was necessary to resurrect the goddess Izanami. At some point in the recent past, he'd killed the wizard Lore, a citizen of the city of Bien. But before he died, Lore had managed to create a talisman that could seal away the demon's magic. Using this talisman was necessary for his defeat. In these first few appearances, he looked like a strange furry creature. I'm honestly not sure where Nishitani came up with the design that we ended up with. I guess it's just a vague demonic design? I feel like I've seen furry blue demons somewhere before. As the first villain of the franchise that we ever knew, Loki is a mainstay in the series, and has appeared in a number of games. Loki was placed in a number of different races of demon throughout the years. In his first few appearances, he was a Vile Demon, a group made up of gods considered to be evil, such as Baal, Asura, and Cthulhu. He would be given the deity race in Shin Megami Tensei and Majin Tensei, which funnily enough made the God of Mischief Law aligned in the original SMT's system. In Devil Children, he was mutant type. I think that's implied he's a version exclusive? I don't know, I haven't played them, this is just based on the wiki. However, his most common race is, fittingly enough, Tyrants, the dark alternative to the deity race that includes many villains, most notably Lucifer himself. His next major appearance would be in the Game Gear version of the first Last Bible game, this time looking more like a masked Sephiroth. He isn't quite himself here though. Like a lot of the other gods and figures fought in that final section, he is educating the protagonists about the history of the universe and the creation of gods, and testing them for their ability to face the Great Will, the power that rules the entire multiverse, sitting above even the most powerful gods of mythology. Starting with the original Shin Megami Tensei, he would almost always use the design created by Kazuma Kaneko, who did a lot of the designs for the series starting with Megami Tensei 2. His Loki design is based on this one by Dutch illustrator Lorenz Vrolijk, based on the Lokasena. While Loki would have a few more character design changes over the years, they were still often based on this one. In Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, he shows up, but not really as a major antagonist. Honestly, he's more of a minor nuisance who you need to mug. Yeah, you just walk in his back door and rob the God of Mischief. I kid you not. He's kind of a bum in this game, honestly. He was tasked with guarding the Star Key, one of the keys to the Labyrinth of Amala, but ends up selling the thing for drinking money. In Devil Survivor, Loki hides himself as a human known only as Gigolo, and does his best to guide the protagonist, Kazuya Minageshi. He doesn't do this out of any sense of altruism or desire for the throne of Bel, but really just for his own amusement. By aiding the protagonists, he helps them to kill Builder, both introducing them to the War of Bel, and much like in mythology, convincing somebody else to murder an incarnation of Baldur. If at any point the protagonist winds up failing to fight one of the other Bel candidates, he will get angry and attack them. He also chooses to butt in on the fight with Naoya, just for fun, I guess. Loki shows up as a side character in the companion manga to Strange Journey, called Another Report, which follows the Gigantic, another ship sent into the Schwarzwald. Here, I think Loki is in absolute top form. He isn't a major protagonist or antagonist, just a side character who decides to toy with Jin, one of the main characters of the manga. He divulges a little bit of extra information just to spice up the situation, and then leaves with his pet Cerberus once he's sowed enough chaos. He also has slightly smaller appearances in a few other games. There are side quests based on fighting him in Shin Megami Tensei 4, 4 Apocalypse, and 5. He also has unique dialogue with Odin, Thor, Valkyrie, Hel, and Fenrir in various games. But we're going to skip those over just because they're generally optional and very minor. Of course, Loki appears in a number of Persona games, which I'm sure is why many of you are here. In this game, he is a representative of the Devil Arcana, which represents the temptation to do selfish and violent things, such as being a liar and a trickster. In Persona 2, he shifted to the Tower Arcana, which tends to represent arrogance and pride that lead to downfall, much like the events of the Lokasena. It also tends to represent disaster, which fits with Loki being the one to cause Ragnarok by killing Baldur. In Persona 3, 4, and their spin-offs, Loki is a part of the Fool Arcana, which I find to be very interesting, as this arcana is consistently used in modern Persona to represent the protagonist. But I think that, once again, this is a connection to his role in Ragnarok. The Fool Arcana represents the beginning of a new journey, and while Ragnarok was the end of the gods, it was not the end of the world, and instead made way for a new future for humanity, thus making Loki a catalyst for those beginnings. But now let's get to the main event, the Detective Prince Goro Akechi. In Persona 5, Loki is one of the two personas used by Akechi, representing the darker, more twisted side of his mind that he hides from the world. Akechi serves a role very close to that of Loki in this game, serving as an ally to the protagonists who eventually betrays them with duplicity and murder. Loki's design is a cascade of black and white, based on a type of camouflage used on warships during World War I. The colors also reflect Akechi's dueling personality, between the heroic Robin Hood and the mischievous Loki. This version of Loki has no eyes, as they've been replaced by demonic horns, hinting towards just how blind to the world his wielder really is. In this game, he's part of the Justice Arcana, which doesn't make sense for Loki on his own, but it's really just a symptom of his connection to Akechi. It could also come from a more sympathetic reading of Loki and Ragnarok, getting back at the Aesir for their unjust treatment of him and his progeny. And that's it for this video. It kind of makes me want to do a video on Robin Hood and make that a character breakdown for Akechi. But also I have a lot of other personas and demons that I want to cover. I could put it on hold for a while. I don't really know, so tell me what you guys want to see. Do you want to see the Robin Hood video? Do you have someone else in mind? And I'll work toward doing those. So thanks for watching. I'll let you all go. See you next time.